Good afternoon all, and welcome to my chemistry capstone project. Today I'm going to be talking about oil paints, where they come from, how they're made, why artists like them, and their chemical composition, all while making my own right in front of you. Here we have the most important ingredient, linseed oil. Oil paints only take 2 ingredients, but this here gives the paints their texture. It makes the pigments paintable and allows them to dry down. I'll talk more about how that works later. Next we have these pigments. They create the color you see in paints and also help balance out the texture. Pigments are most often made from minerals, even heavy metals, which, when uncontrolled, as it was many years ago, can be dangerous to the artist. The rest of what I have here includes a palette knife, a palette, and oil on a canvas. The knife allows me to mix my ingredients, and the canvas with oil paints will allow me to compare my homemade paints with professionally made product. Oil paints originate as far back as 650 AD, but only rose to popularity around 1410 after a famous artist, Jan van Eyck, used them in a well-liked piece. After this, the medium immediately skyrocketed to preferential treatment for many professional artists. Previous to oil paints, tempera paints were commonly used. Because they were egg white based, they dried quickly and finished well. However, they proved difficult to work with in comparison to oil paints. Oil paints dry much slower, allowing extra time to blend with. This characteristic became favorable as artists moved to creating more photorealistic interpretations of people. Enough about the history though, let's get mixing. What I've done here is place the powder onto my palette. I'm not using any specific ratios here because every pigment is different and requires a different amount of oil to achieve prime texture. Now I'm going to add the oil in small amounts as I mix it. The texture shouldn't be too liquidy or too powdery, thin enough to spread but thick enough to stick. As I balance these ingredients, let me tell you about the chemistry going on here. The primary factor here in oil paints is that it's an oil base rather than a water base. Acrylics, watercolor, and gouache are all water-based paints, meaning that they dry through evaporation. The pigments suspend in the solvent, which allows the color to be distributed evenly, and that goes the same for oils. However, water-based paints harden because the water evaporates, leaving primarily pigments behind. This equals a short drying time and a generally reliable finish, meaning that it's less likely to crack or oxidate. Oil paints must be made with drying oils. They're required to have an iodine number greater than 130, which means that because they're polyunsaturated fats, it can be determined how unsaturated they are by measuring the number of grams of iodine consumed by 100 grams of fat. Because the oils most commonly used, linseed oil, is above 130, it works very well for the purpose. Drying oils dry through oxidation, which can take much longer than other paints. It can also lead to problematic finishes. If not varnished once dry, the paint can go through different processes that affect the quality of the piece as it ages. Some oils used in the paints yellow over time due to the oxidation, changing the color of the piece. Other oils, especially thinner ones, can cause cracking over time. This occurs because oil paintings are often done in many layers. If a layer is put on before the one beneath it is fully dry, the top layer can dry before the bottom, and when this happens, the bottom layer eventually dries, but it can break up the previous dried top layer. It's important to consider these factors when choosing an oil to use, but as I previously said, linseed oil is most commonly used because it presents a happy medium between all factors. So here's the final product I got, and I'm going to be spreading it on the canvas just so that you can see, and I'll be comparing it to the other actual paints. So there might be a slight difference here, not only because mine isn't professionally mixed, but factories also sometimes use additives. Different additives can alter the drying time, adjust the texture, add light fatness, which is protecting the color from UV rays, and provide varying levels of gloss, all by changing the chemical composition just slightly. Overall, though oil paints are simple to make, it's easy to see that there's far more chemistry going on than what meets the eye. The different ways in which the paint dries, how it mixes, and how it ages all contribute to the unique and important take science has on art.